again.
All right, my teacher friends. So first things first, I'm a big contender that good writing equals good thinking. And when students learn to sustain a cogent line of reasoning, they're not just writing better essays, they're learning how to transfer their brilliant thoughts onto paper. So what I have for us in this video, it's a true labor of love. This took me a long time to put together. I break down the reasoning moves inside beloved children's books like The Little Red Hen, The Three Little Pigs, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, The Tortoise and the Hare, The Very Hungry Caterpillar, If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, There Was an Old Lady Who Swallowed a Fly, and Are You My Mother? So classic children's tales that have clear, progressive lines of reasoning in them. In the video's description down below, you can find a slide deck that will help you through the whole process in case you want to adapt this lesson for your classroom use. So it goes over the directions, it has exemplars, it has definitions, and here's the cool thing, the grand finale. Students get to write their own children's books while practicing sustained reasoning. And then to model this, I wrote it 2 times. As the Bob Ross composition, I got to have models and exemplars. So I have a story called Clara the Cow Wants to Become a Big Mac that has a clear, sustained line of reasoning, and then a simple one called Ricky the Race Car. So I hope you enjoy this one and can use it to elicit clearly how to sustain a line of reasoning in composition. All right, ladies and germs, we got to talk first about the following question. What is a line of reasoning? I like this definition that I came up with, and I have an analogy that I use that really helps kind of elicit what I mean by line of reasoning. So here's the definition that I give my kids. A line of reasoning is the logical path a writer takes to connect their claim, the thesis, to their evidence and conclusion. It's how the ideas build on each other step by step so the reader can follow the argument. Here's my analogy. Think of it like a trail of stepping stones across a river. Each stone, the reason, the example, the explanation, leads to the next until you safely reach the other side of the conclusion. So a line of reasoning is ultimately a big giant circle, right? You end where you begin. And oftentimes in compositions, students don't necessarily cross that river successfully, right? They get waylaid and a little discursive in their thoughts. And that's what separates, I think, the good writers from those that struggle and I deem to be emerging. So let's crack that open and take a look at some examples. So I use these with my students. Teachers that are doing this in their classroom, I print this whole slide deck out or put it in my Google Classroom so that students have it. I just project it on my board and go over it. So uniforms create equality among students, which would be the reason. Equality reduces social pressure and bullying, which is the cause and effect. With less bullying, students can focus more on academics, linking back to school's purpose. Therefore, requiring uniforms supports a healthier learning environment, which is the conclusion. So typically, what we're doing here is the heuristic that I use in my body paragraphs with my students, and you guys that are familiar with my work know that I use something called the syllogistic method. It's an Aristotelian heuristic, and when I'm teaching line of reasoning, it really makes sense to tie it to the syllogistic construct because students are following like a step-by-step process. I got one more example for us. Many teenagers graduate without knowing how to budget, save, or manage credit. That's the problem. Without these skills, they are more likely to go into debt or make poor financial choices. That's the cause and effect. Learning financial literacy early prepares students to handle real-world responsibilities like rent, student loans, and bills. That's the logical consequence. Therefore, so you always have a therefore in a body paragraph. Teaching financial literacy in high school sets students up for long-term independence and success. So what I do next is I have a read along. We kind of go back to the womb and back to kindergarten and first grade and read children's stories. So I have copies of all of these. If you don't have copies, there's actually renditions on YouTube, and sometimes those little cartoon renditions are better than a straight up read along. So I tend to do a read along. My kids think it's sort of silly and fun to do. So in the following slides, I have a mind map for you where you get the line of reasoning, the step-by-step logic of each book, why it's cogent, and then the classroom application. And you can see here I did it for the Three Little Pigs. I did it for Goldilocks and the Three Bears. All right, and these are just teacher notes for you. It's pretty clear. You guys can understand that. Tortoise and Hare. I also did the Very Hungry Caterpillar. And you can see here that I'm doing the same thing. Each slide's the same. Line of reasoning, step-by-step logic, why it's cogent, the classroom application. And I did If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, which I've made a video on before, exclusively on that. There Was an Old Lady Who Swallowed a Fly. And the last one is Are You My Mother by P.D. Eastman. So all cool stuff to kind of unpack what line of reasoning is and just to illustrate it. So ultimately, here's where we're going with this unit. The assignment calls for this. Students are going to write and illustrate their own children's book using a line of reasoning. I did objectives and what to do and the tips of the trade for this. So I go over this explicitly with my students. So the objective is this: to demonstrate your understanding of line of reasoning by creating an original children's book that uses a clear logical sequence of ideas. You will both write the story and illustrate it using Canva. So we have free Canva accounts at my school. So that's why I'm using that. Some of you might not have access to that. So just, you could use Google Slides or PowerPoint, something along those lines. So here's what they need to do. Choose a theme or message. Think about the big idea or lesson you want your story to convey. So examples are like the value of hard work, the dangers of arrogance, the power of kindness. This will serve as your claim thesis in the story. So what we did was we kind of cranked our inner philosophies and I gave kids a marker and we went around the whiteboards and just wrote down a whole bunch of themes that we could use to house our stories. So to plan the line of reasoning, they got to do this. Decide how your story will logically move from beginning to end. Use one of the common reasoning patterns we've studied. So cause and effect, escalation, circular reason, inquiry, and questioning. So those are the ones that are indigenous to all the stories that we read together. Moving on, they got to write the story. So I'm telling them to keep it short and clear, 8 to 12 pages. Use simple language, right? Because it is, you have children as your audience, like a real children's book, but make sure the reasoning is strong. Each page should clearly move the story forward. And then I want them to illustrate it in Canva. So choose a storybook or presentation template for your design. This takes very little instruction. Canva is very intuitive. So if you've never used it before, I find it to be easier than Google Slides and PowerPoint. And it's a little fancier. So they got to add one illustration per page that matches the action or reasoning step. So you can draw in Canva's graphics, which is pretty cool, or upload your own images from like Google Images. And Canva has a pretty large bank of images too. So the final touches. Make sure your story shows a complete logical path, starting point, reasoning steps, conclusion. They have to title it and they have to put their author's name on it as well. And then for the final products, I want them to print it as a PDF. And then we just have a read along, like a gallery walk, reading the stories. So as always, as the Bob Ross of composition, I like to provide some exemplars for this. So I wrote 2 stories. Here's my first one. It's called Ricky the Race Car. Ricky the race car zoomed onto the track. He was shiny, fast, and ready to win. but suddenly mud splashed onto his windshield. I can't see, said Ricky, so he zoomed into the pit stop for windshield wiper fluid. And then I'm going to need to change this slide because it's too dark. So obviously it's difficult to read, but you can check it out there. Moving on. Ricky roared back onto the racetrack, but then sputter, he ran out of gas. Oh no, I can't go anywhere without fuel. He rode back into the pit stop for a fill-up. Finally, Ricky was flying faster than ever, but then boom, his engine overheated and he blew a gasket. Yikes, back to the pit stop. After his repairs, Ricky thought to himself, even the fastest cars need help along the way. Pit stops don't slow you down, they keep you going. And the last page, and with that, Ricky zipped back on the track stronger than ever. So that's just a really simple one for the students that might struggle with this a little bit. I got a lot of concrete kids that do things very literally, so this is going to prove a challenge for them. So for teacher notes, I broke down the line of reasoning and all my moves there. And you might want to have kids do this when they submit their stories. Actually follow this as a template so that they can explain all the lines of reasoning within their story. I think that's a good practice. So I think I'm going to have my kids do that. So I painted another exemplar for us, and it's titled Clara the Cow Wants to Become a Big Mac. And I just wrote it out on paper for you. I didn't illustrate this one, just to give you a model. Clara the cow had a big dream. I don't want to be just any cow, she said. I want to be a Big Mac. First, she needed to look the part. She stacked 2 giant hamburger buns on her head and said, perfect, now I look like a sandwich. But a Big Mac has more than just buns. Clara waddled over to the garden. She put lettuce leaves on her back and tomato slices on her hooves. Now I'm getting closer. Next, she needed cheese. Clara trotted to the dairy barn and borrowed 2 slices from her friends. Don't worry, she said. I'll bring them back when I'm done. Then she remembered the special sauce. Clara mixed ketchup, mustard, and a dash of pickle juice in a bucket. She dipped her towel and twirled it like a chef. Finally, Clara stacked everything together, buns, lettuce, cheese, sauce. She said proudly, ta-da, now I am the Big Mac. Her barnyard friends cheered. You may not be a burger, said the pig, but you sure are the star of the farm. Clara grinned. Dream big, stay silly, and don't forget the pickles, she said. And then here you have the breakdown for that one in terms of its particular line of reasoning. All right. I hope you enjoy that one, my friends, and can use it in your classroom. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to reach out to me. My email is write@ibright@gmail.com. Many of you know that I go around to districts all the time. So I teach in the Rochester, New York area. But during holidays and summer breaks, even on the weekends, I'll hop on Zooms and teach teachers one-on-one, or I'll work with entire departments to get them aligned. So if that's something you're interested in, we can talk your needs and what I have to offer. Just give me an email at write@ibright@gmail.com. I'll keep these coming. So I have a whole arsenal of ideas that I'm kicking off the school year with. And this is just kind of a front loader activity before we tackle our first compositions. Take care for now.